All right, I'm gonna do a little reaction video and just make sure my audio is all good and all. All right, testing, we're good. Here we go.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Theory. Today we're going to cover something from the novelization of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith by Matthew Stover. Now, I was rereading the novel, and if you haven't seen my interview with Matthew Stover, Mark and I got the pleasure of actually being able to speak to him and ask him a bunch of interesting questions regarding the prequels, originals, and sequels. Anyways, today, Matthew Stover wrote something in the Revenge of the Sith novel that I'd like to go over. And it has to do with what Sidious said Yoda actually was. Now, if you guys remember in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, Yoda limped over to Count Dooku on Geonosis after Count Dooku took out Obi-Wan Kenobi and Skywalker. We see Yoda turn the corner, and he's just steadily walking with his cane. Very unassuming, and then finally takes his lightsaber out, does some leaps, and just goes absolutely insane. Now, while I've done videos in the past regarding why Yoda uses a cane, today's video will touch more on that, however, from Sidious's perspective, and that's why it's more unique and interesting, I think. So let's go over the dialogue from the novel, and then we can expand upon it and talk about it. The hollow presence faded, and where its huge translucency had knelt was now revealed another presence, a physical presence, tiny and aged, clad in robes and leaning on a twist of wood. But his physical presence was an illusion. The truth of him could be seen only in the Force.
Interesting.
He was
faking it almost.
This is your new disciple, I do. So lately an apprentice, so soon without a master. Why, Master Yoda, what a delightful surprise. Welcome.
The voice of the Shadow hummed with anticipation.
Let me be the first to wish you Happy Empire Day. Find it happy? You will not.
So this is a book.
The murderer you call Vader.
The Shadow stepped closer to the light.
So that is the threat I felt. Who is it, if I may ask? Who have you sent to kill him? Enough it is that you know your own destroyer.
So before we continue, which I'm going to do in another video covering other aspects of this afterwards and before this quote, which are equally as interesting. If you didn't catch what Sidious said about Yoda in his own mind, his thoughts about Yoda as Yoda showed up, is that he was a fountain of light, that his physical presence was just an illusion, and the truth of him could be seen only in the Force. So this,
that's pretty smart, because Yoda is very smart, but he was faking it to seem like he wasn't as strong as what he really was, and people would believe him because of how old he was.
Made me picture when I was reading this. Made me picture that scene in The Matrix where they stop seeing flesh and bone, but they rather just see code. And do you remember at the end where Neo was completely
I've actually not seen that movie yet, but I want to.
As the One? I think this is how Sidious sees Yoda. So it kind of makes me believe that maybe Force users are able to see a different side to reality than maybe normal people. And I think the more powerful you are in the Force, the more you can actually see. So like Mace Windu, for example, had his ability of Shatterpoint, which allowed him to see different obstacles, people, scenarios, and their weakest points of breaking. And then when Palpatine was fighting Mace Windu, Anakin described their fighting as a blur of purple and red.
Yeah, because it went by so fast.
Even with his eyes, and even with his powers in the Force. So this kind of changes that scene for me forever now, when Yoda walks into Palpatine's office in Revenge of the Sith, and Palpatine just sees him as this beacon of light, this fountain of light, meaning that Yoda is
fountain of youth,
the most pure form of the Force, of the light side of the Force, that is, and Palpatine is seen as the Shadow, and referred to as the Shadow in this novel a lot. So you have the perfect yin and yang of each other, the light side embodiment, essentially, and then the darkest side of the Force, which is the Shadow, Palpatine. One thing I also want to touch on is that Palpatine was only about 60 or so years old in Revenge of the Sith, whereas Yoda was 850 years old or so.
Yeah,
so
that's what
if we gave Palpatine the same amount of lifespan as Yoda, and they were already equal at this point, while Palpatine was only about 8% of Yoda's full age, or even less than that, it makes me wonder just how insanely sadistically powerful Palpatine would become if he had the same lifespan as Yoda's species. Which takes me into the Mandalorian
that would
and
almost be unfair, pretty much.
Book of Boba Fett, where Palpatine is really trying to,
and it doesn't,
to clone Grogu. And I believe this is to harness his, not just his Force abilities, but more so harness his ability to live for such a long time for his species.
Yeah, and something that's so confusing. Once again, why do we not see Grogu in the sequels if he has a long lifespan? You know, something
And
has to
maybe
happen to him.
implant that into the body of Palpatine that they already cloned, which we saw in Episode 9 Rise of Skywalker, or perhaps something they were already working on, or maybe
Oh, that's an interesting picture. Hold on.
cloned, which we saw in Episode 9 Rise of Skywalker.
I don't think
or
I've seen this
perhaps
yet. What is this? Still a bunch of clones of
something they were
Palpatine?
already working on, or maybe even Snoke, and have it live to be 900 to 1,000 years old. So maybe the plan all along isn't to have a force-sensitive body that Palpatine can jump his essence into, but to have the DNA and the understanding of how to replicate a super old being. You know, I was always alternating between two different ideas when we noticed that Grogu was being manipulated, or at least examined and experimented on, by the clone facility that used to belong on Kamino, as we saw in Dr. Pershing's patch in The Mandalorian. I first thought, okay, well, Palpatine needs a clone body of something that he can jump his essence into. And then I thought, well, he also really wants to live to be super old, so maybe he could do all of that in this one body. But kind of bypassing the fact that maybe he doesn't really care if this body can harness his soul, perhaps, but he's looking for the ability that this body has at cell either regeneration or aging, or de-aging, I should say. Maybe his team is trying to find how exactly to replicate this sort of slow cellular degeneration in Yoda, or Yoda's species, and to replicate that in his own body that he has sitting on Exegol. Since now, of course, they want to tie everything into Episode 9. Or perhaps since Baby Yoda's primary power so far seems to be healing, maybe they're going to just use him to heal anything that they want. This leads me to something completely different.
You could heal Palpatine.
They want Baby Yoda, maybe they want Grogu to heal all of the Snoke clones that they've created, all of the Palpatine clone bodies that they've created that are a little bit...
Because now it help him, maybe like a reason why Snoke maybe got so powerful.
Deformed or messed up, kind of like the one we saw.
Instead of being,
in the Episode 9 Rise of Skywalker novel, it explained how Palpatine's body just could not contain the power of his essence in that form. And so it started to wither away. So this makes me wonder if Palpatine's body was actually super strong to begin with when he transferred his essence after Return of the Jedi, which still, I really don't like that story. But it is what it is. We're going to go along with it for now, just to connect the dots of everything here. And then over time, his body was just deteriorating because Palpatine's power was so immense that the mortal flesh couldn't handle it, unless it was really intertwined with the original Palpatine, of course, who was able to, for the most part, handle that kind of power. Of course, he got decrepit and old, but, he was still doing okay. He was still walking around. So one piece of dialogue from a book just makes me theorize on so many different things and takes me all the way to The Mandalorian and try to connect the different stories and create something. Now, of course, these are all theories, as in the channel name, which is Star Wars Theory, but it does make you think, and it makes you wonder, if Yoda was really the fountain of light that Palpatine said he was and saw him as, then could anything from that body or from that species be used?
I think it could be, since it is, maybe Grogu is a part of the same species as Yoda. That means technically he has the same DNA, which can help him live a long life. So what Palpatine is doing, somehow we don't know the history of Grogu, how he exists. Maybe Grogu is a clone. But the thing is, with Grogu, Palpatine wants to, he wants to live long. Maybe that's the secret how Palpatine is still alive in The Rise of Skywalker, through Grogu. He got some of his DNA and maybe put it inside himself or a clone or something.
To contain dark side abilities? I think the answer to that is yes, because Yoda could have easily just used the dark side as he was so powerful in the Force, but it was his choices that kept him within the light. So while Yoda was always trying to seem as very unassuming and very slow and weak, he was actually just conserving all of his energy, just like a massive engine on a car would if it's just idling along. But when the floodgates open, then it really roars to life.
Right.
And I think that was the case with Yoda. Yoda was so powerful in the Force that he was able to contain all of his energy and use it in sporadic moments that he needed to in order to flip against walls and make up for his small stature, so to speak. So anyways, I think the idea of Palpatine thinking that he's a fountain of youth itself and saying that his small stature and physical presence was just an illusion, and that the truth of him could only be seen in the Force, kind of like some special Force goggles that you would need to have at Palpatine's level in order to actually see how strong Yoda was, I think is really interesting and eye-opening as to how pure and powerful Yoda was. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and my thoughts on it and the theories on it that led into The Mandalorian, or could lead into The Mandalorian Season 3 with Grogu, Baby Yoda, and more. Have a great rest of your day. I'm looking forward to the Book of Boba Fett, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah, first
of Star
episode,
Wars
Book of
Theory.
Boba Fett.
Until
Nice.
then, remember, the Force will be with you always.
All right, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching.